Some people walk into a room and cause the temperature to change, no small talk, just a silent shift that unsettles every comfort zone around them. Authenticity has a way of pressing against invisible boundaries, pulling back curtains people were happy to hide behind. When those who refuse to compromise their clarity enter the scene, the atmosphere thickens, not with arrogance, but with the rare oxygen of truth. Suddenly, old alliances start to feel outgrown. The laughter loses its rhythm. Invitations seem to vanish, and the familiar script of group dynamics scrambles to find a new lead. If this message speaks to you, don't forget to hit subscribe and join the journey. Those who refuse to dilute their presence aren't dismissed for being harsh or cold. It's the uncompromising light that unsettles shadows others were content to live within. Some folks don't resent the outspoken, they quietly resist the ones who remain genuine, untouched by flattery or peer pressure, unmoved by the tides of shallow approval. It's the commitment to full-spectrum living that triggers the quiet exiles and restless whispers, not a loud proclamation of self-worth. In a world that celebrates surface-level unity, daring to embody your real substance is often mistaken for indifference. But the discomfort in others is just an echo of their own unexamined fears, not a measure of your worth. The honest glow of undiluted spirit is neither rebellion nor arrogance, it is the quiet refusal to shrink into pre-approved versions of belonging. Let's unravel this together: why authenticity is so often misunderstood, why honesty disrupts, and why honoring the fullness of your being will always expose whatever was built on pretense. There's freedom in understanding that you're not here to blend in but to reveal what blending in would cost. If that stirs the waters, let them ripple. There are those who don't even need to speak to change the atmosphere, just existing as they are, everything begins to shift. Sometimes, simply moving through life with integrity and self-respect causes others to face corners of themselves they would rather keep in shadow. It's never the clothes or the conversations that cause discomfort, but the unfiltered truth that radiates from someone who's decided not to hide. In a crowd, the presence of honest confidence isn't about challenging others, it's about existing without the need to fit any mold. Quiet certainty tends to draw out unspoken comparisons in those nearby, old stories and half-built dreams resurface, not because anyone pointed a finger, but because authenticity quietly invites reality to the surface. Effortless self-assurance doesn't try to outshine or compete, and that's exactly what unsettles the status quo. The art of being fully at ease with one's own journey stands out, not for any show, but for refusing to participate in the performance. That realness often causes roles to unravel and old patterns to lose their grip. Where some still seek applause for their masks, others find themselves confronted by the peace they've spent so long avoiding. Being true to one's own direction isn't an act of rebellion, it's a gentle but unstoppable call to look deeper, even when that's uncomfortable for others. There comes a moment when trying to dim what's natural inside feels like pressing pause on the heart itself. Blending into someone else's comfort zone means silencing the instincts that point toward growth. Settling for shallow approval becomes a slow drift away from vitality. Shrinking for acceptance chips away at vibrancy, until the spark starts to feel like a distant echo. Opting out of half-hearted connections or empty routines isn't pride, it's preservation. When standing tall means standing alone, it's not isolation, it's the clarity that comes with refusing to dissolve into the background. Attempts to play along or edit one's own essence only serve to create distance from the core. The world sometimes confuses self-trust with arrogance, but real power is quiet and steady, it doesn't seek permission to take up space. In the end, each refusal to downplay wisdom or to mute vision is an act of loyalty to the purpose carried within. That's where fulfillment waits, not at the tables where voices compete to be heard, but in the freedom to stand as a full, undiluted self. Sometimes that means fewer invitations, but every step taken in truth is a declaration that it's better to be genuine and alone than welcomed and erased. Those who remain tethered to surface-level belonging might never understand, but the soul knows the cost of shrinking, and chooses authenticity every time. Some crave connection, but only when they can set the volume for everyone else's brilliance. They're drawn to uncommon presence, but only if it's pliable, easily shaped and quieted, contained within lines they never admit to drawing. The discomfort rarely lies in raw ability or vision. The real tension is in knowing that the spark cannot be borrowed, adjusted, or handed out in pieces. There's a quiet demand: offer your insight, but only if it's wrapped in uncertainty; share your gifts, but only if they remain soft enough to handle. True confidence without disguise unsettles those who feel secure in controlling the temperature of every room. Admiration fades the instant originality stands unedited. As soon as self-acceptance drops the mask of false humility, the mood in the crowd changes. Whispers rise. Compliments turn into critique. The old dance of approval dissolves because the expectation of submission has been quietly refused. It becomes clear, the celebration was for a version that felt manageable, not for the real thing. When the curtain lifts and there's no apology for existing fully, hidden envy finds a voice. Labels and stories start flying, not because anything's changed, but because authenticity is no longer negotiable. Attempts to minimize what can't be claimed or controlled become the next performance. Yet authenticity isn't erased by rumor, it's strengthened by the friction. Nothing built on borrowed energy ever lasts, but what's genuine, once owned, is untouchable. Genuine connection never asks someone to erase themselves for comfort, and real love doesn't shrink in the face of wholeness. Certain souls land in the middle of well-worn paths, never quite able to settle into the shape the crowd expects. Inherited blueprints and silent codes begin to feel heavy long before anyone else questions them. The sense of misfit isn't born from rebellion, but from a longing to unearth what was buried under years of routine acceptance. Patterns dressed up as tradition often disguise the weight of repetition. The moment awareness dawns, friction begins. The deep tension lies in refusing to keep passing along the old script, choosing healing over repetition, self-respect over habit, clarity over comfort. When that choice is made, the system shudders. Resistance arises, cloaked as tradition or respect, but the pushback is never about disloyalty, it's a reaction to someone stepping outside inherited boundaries. Awakening is mistaken for defiance only by those invested in never questioning. Standing firm means seeing through the thin disguises of belonging, recognizing that imitation is not belonging, and that real unity isn't forged by ignoring truth. Those who untangle themselves from generational knots know that love doesn't require silence, and peace can't be built on performance. Choosing honesty over pretense, and presence over avoidance, will always expose what is no longer sustainable. Even if applause never comes from familiar hands, every step away from the old pattern is a victory that echoes far beyond the present moment. Some journeys aren't about maintaining, but about ending what needed to be finished long ago. Not every kind of knowing can be traced to textbooks or measured by diplomas. Some awareness lingers in the bones, quietly echoing stories that existed long before modern wisdom ever had a name. When deep insight surfaces, most try to box it up, brand it with convenient labels, or dismiss it as too much. But there are minds shaped by 1,000 silent lessons, wisdom steeped in experiences the world forgot to count. This kind of knowing is instinctual, woven from lessons inherited and strength remembered. Answers arise from a place untouched by trends, rooted instead in the endurance and clarity of those who came before. Such perception notices what's unspoken before words arrive. It recognizes the subtle rhythm of truth in a room, not because of practice but because of legacy. The thread of discernment never needed an audience or permission, it simply is, unbothered by those who'd rather not understand. Surface-level chatter finds no foothold, tired ideas cannot sway what is deeply anchored. Those who thrive on easy agreement or trendy thinking find themselves lost in the presence of a perspective that is neither for sale nor for imitation. True wisdom resists being repackaged for comfort. Attempts to explain it away usually mask an inability to grasp its depth. Some will resent what they cannot name, dismiss what challenges their habits, and distance themselves from any reminder that some journeys are written far beneath the surface. The gift of this insight is not up for debate or permission, it arrived long before approval was ever required. So let others struggle to decode what was never meant for their understanding, the work remains, and the path continues, unfiltered, undiluted, unapologetically whole. Some circles welcome lightness, so long as it never becomes a fire. As long as warmth is easy to handle and never threatens to ignite real change, comfort is assured. Jokes and easy smiles win praise, the gentle mask of playfulness keeps everyone safe, everyone settled. But when laughter fades and focus sharpens, the energy in the room quickly shifts. The presence that was once celebrated for keeping things soft is now quietly questioned, subtly pushed aside. No applause greets the one who stops spinning stories to entertain or soothe. The familiar act of making everyone comfortable is replaced by a new, clear direction, a silent understanding that there is more to live for than just being agreeable. Growth replaces small talk, seriousness is mistaken for distance, but it's simply a new level of clarity refusing to be shelved for convenience. Those invested in things staying easy struggle with transformation, they miss the company of someone who kept the air light and never asked them to reconsider their comfort zones. It's not coldness but evolution, not arrogance but a quiet devotion to something deeper. There is no obligation to carry laughter for others, no need to keep spirits high at the cost of purpose. Real alignment means stepping out of the background and embracing the full power of what is possible, even if that leaves old audiences behind. Some will watch from the sidelines, hoping for the familiar spark, but the journey goes on, with or without the chorus of easy approval. Some minds crave meaning in every exchange and quickly sense when dialogue lacks substance. The weariness sets in when conversations revolve around routine and repetition, when hours pass in idle chatter but nothing actually grows. It isn't distance or arrogance, it's the ache of hunger for something nourishing, the sense that hollow words leave the heart emptier than before. With every superficial exchange, an inner compass points toward a deeper horizon, quietly urging a search for authenticity. Quiet observation replaces forced laughter. Where many fixate on trending topics or fleeting distractions, a subtler gaze catches underlying truths, reading intentions, understanding how old wounds speak through humor, and sensing how real emotions get cloaked in noise. The unyielding search for meaning makes it impossible to settle for surface-level exchanges. Participation in hollow customs feels like self-betrayal, not because of pride, but because staying silent in the crowd protects what is sacred within. Standing out isn't about making a statement, it's about refusing to dilute what matters most. There's no interest in imitating joy or feigning excitement for things that don't spark the soul. The urge is to spark awakening, to invite others to open up, to talk about what's real. Yet, many resist. Comfort in shallow waters feels safer for those unready to dive deep. If that difference gets labeled as distance or seriousness, so be it. The quest isn't for applause or approval, but for moments that are alive, sincere, and unforgettable. Anyone who can't meet in those depths was only ever passing through. The world often expects ease, but some are wired for illumination, not distraction. There's a presence that brings clarity, a way of showing up that doesn't settle for comfort at the expense of truth. The mission is never about applause or winning favor, it's about leaving behind the need to blend in by offering something that cuts through the haze. Carrying the responsibility of insight means bearing weight that rarely draws a crowd. While many prefer a gentle breeze that keeps things undisturbed, there are those meant to challenge complacency, to stir the room from routine. Not everyone is prepared for the kind of honesty that lays illusions bare. Some come hoping for amusement, only to be handed a wake-up call. Directness is often mistaken for harshness, authenticity confused with confrontation. What is offered isn't entertainment, but revelation, an invitation to examine what's real beneath years of habit or fear. Sometimes the response is resistance, sometimes silence, sometimes envy. Yet, none of that deters the messenger, because the calling is to remind others of truths they once knew but now bury. The intent was never to be a fixture on someone's stage or a character in their story of convenience. The reason for being is to move people toward their own clarity, to break the cycle of empty connection, and to spark self-recognition in those ready to see. In a world that rewards distraction, being a catalyst for growth is often misunderstood, but that's the proof of purpose, not a sign to shrink. There's an undeniable stillness that interrupts the usual script when someone brings genuine depth to the table. The atmosphere tenses, not from discomfort with drama, but from the realization that easy answers and surface-level humor won't suffice. For many, routines of evasion and polite distraction are a shield. When confronted by someone who cuts through all that, it becomes impossible to keep up the act. The person who leans into honesty, who sees beneath layers, who doesn't shy away from what's unspoken, becomes a silent force that disrupts every performance in the room. Avoidance has many faces: deflection, jokes, small talk, a quick change of subject. But true insight calls these patterns out without a word, inviting authenticity to the surface. Masks slip, tension flares, and old wounds are suddenly raw, not because of confrontation, but because a presence entered that doesn't traffic in illusions. No effort is made to stir up trouble or seek out wounds, yet the effect is the same: there is no place left to hide. In these moments, intensity is often misunderstood as coldness, and straightforwardness is seen as a threat. But what's actually happening is much simpler: there is a quiet refusal to pretend, and that is both rare and vital in a world built on appearances. If that means being misunderstood, so be it. The purpose is never to create pain, it's to bring light, even when it stings. Some minds are quietly relentless, moving past every layer of self-deception and seeing exactly what others work to conceal. It's not about challenging for the sake of a challenge, but about asking the questions that pierce through narratives woven for comfort. In a crowd that's mastered the art of forgetting, sidestepping, and half-admitting, those who bring clarity don't just unsettle, they reveal what's been locked away. This sort of perception isn't loud or showy. It simply refuses to gloss over contradictions or settle for shallow consensus. Life for many is built on fragile arrangements, selective remembering, dodged accountability, practiced smiles. Every unspoken thing is stored behind locked doors, and each question that leads there is quietly discouraged. When someone arrives who won't settle for convenient stories, who keeps peeling back the layers, who isn't satisfied with silence, the tension is palpable. The old games can't be played, the audience disperses. Defensiveness, gossip, and distance follow, not because of actual offense, but because authenticity cannot be choreographed. No one sets out to unsettle others, yet truth has that effect. Words like difficult and overanalyzing become masks for sees more than I'm comfortable with. The sharpness of this perception isn't a weapon, it's a gentle, necessary confrontation with reality. What's reflected back is never cruel, just unvarnished, and for some, that's more threatening than any accusation. The role isn't to keep illusions intact but to let them dissolve, making room for something that finally, honestly, feels alive. Own journeys reach a point where repeating yourself becomes a silent surrender. The effort once spent trying to pour your essence into cups never meant to hold it finally runs dry. Attempts to simplify yourself for others, to condense all that you've become into palatable pieces, become exhausting rituals that yield nothing but confusion. Adjusting your brightness to match their dimmer switches never creates true connection, it only makes your own vision blurry. Years may pass spent translating your reality into dialects built on familiarity, but none of it ever settles. It isn't clarity they seek, it's compliance. While you invested in explanation and gentle compromise, all they measured was how far you wandered from their blueprint. Eventually, the silent toll of self-betrayal outlasts the sting of their silence. The curtain drops on the endless debates and contorted apologies. Existence stops being a classroom for doubters. Distance emerges, not as rejection, but as a quiet release. Those unable or unwilling to travel beyond their boundaries naturally fade. Words grow fewer, connections become whispers, but in the echo of emptiness, peace steps in. Not the fleeting calm that comes from belonging, but the grounded assurance that comes from no longer requiring permission to exist. Those who watch from afar are not angered by wounds you caused, they grieve the loss of the old framework that you outgrew. Transformation rarely gets applause from the audience invested in sameness. The discomfort lies not in your evolution, but in the realization that you have become unreachable to those who remain anchored to what was. The courage to leave behind the familiar for the sake of truth is often met with resentment from those unwilling to venture out. That reaction is not yours to fix or carry. The task is not universal acceptance, but remaining faithful to the unfolding path, even if that path winds forward without a crowd. Certain presences create ripples that disrupt every hidden current in a space. The moment genuine energy enters, the invisible dynamics shift, the air grows dense, laughter dims, and conversations stall mid-sentence. Nothing is said aloud, but the atmosphere reveals what's been lurking beneath the surface. Stillness replaces comfort, and glances dart as if secrets suddenly weigh more. It's not suspicion or anxiety, it's an unmistakable reaction to authenticity that doesn't bend or apologize. The arrival of realness unsettles those who thrive in shadow, making avoidance and evasion impossible. The light doesn't simply brighten, it draws out whatever was lurking in the quiet corners, pulling masks away and prompting people to fumble for explanations. No need for confrontation, no dramatic accusations, the truth simply becomes undeniable. This shift isn't about force, it's about resonance. Any presence that refuses to lower its integrity creates a mirror, and that reflection becomes a challenge for everything that hoped to remain hidden. Those most disturbed are never startled by words, but by the silent certainty that makes everything exposed and unfiltered. That's why some withdraw, why eyes search for exits, and why the room suddenly feels smaller. The real power isn't in what's repelled, but in what can no longer remain concealed when clarity stands in the light. Some spirits are simply built to resist dilution, no matter how much the world insists on blending everything into bland sameness. There's no satisfaction in being easy to process or in offering meaning that slips down without thought. While most seek quick comfort in simple distractions and echo chambers, the true challenge is found in presenting substance that demands to be considered, that refuses to vanish beneath layers of numbing entertainment. Depth is often unwelcome where superficial chatter is the norm. Many grow uneasy around substance, they long for something easy to swallow, familiar, and unthreatening. But there's a different current beneath the surface, one that asks for patience, for questions, for real engagement. This energy doesn't soften itself for others' convenience, nor does it apologize for making people work harder to understand what's real. Unfiltered presence unsettles those accustomed to drifting on autopilot. The invitation is not to conform, but to disrupt, to jolt minds out of routine, to push beyond the obvious, to remind people what it feels like to actually experience meaning that cannot be mimicked. When that challenge proves too much, the resistance comes not as outright rejection, but as requests to dim the light, to soften the truth, to go back to blending in. But this spirit refuses the comfort of the crowd's approval. It remains vibrant and uncompromising, never adjusting its brilliance just to make others feel less challenged by their own neglect. Real nourishment isn't for everyone. Some aren't ready to recognize what they've starved themselves from. Criticism, coldness, and dismissal are simply confirmation that the message has landed, that the substance has unsettled what was comfortable but empty. Legacy is never built by pleasing the crowd or diluting one's essence to fit their taste. It is born from the courage to be unmistakably whole in a world desperate for distraction, to remain unswayed by the noise. The ones who can recognize that richness will always gather, drawn by the authenticity that doesn't perform or shrink. As the noise fades, what remains is not what was easy, but what was unbreakable, and that is what will echo long after the crowd moves on.